Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest Brian Brady, who's here to share with us his two new books, Still Waters Run Deep and Greed. So what happens when a former police chief who spent decades solving real crimes begins writing crime fiction? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Born and raised in the vibrant heart of San Francisco, Brian Brady found endless inspiration in the city, celebrated for its stunning architecture, dynamic sports teams, rich traditions, and colorful characters. His career journey began as a police officer, later transitioning to a corporate security executive. He then moved into the private sector, holding executive positions at prestigious organizations such as NBC Universal and the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. So welcome to the show, Brian Brady.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here. And my goodness, what a profound career you've had. And I'm so excited we get to talk about your books. What inspired you to begin writing crime fiction after your career in law enforcement?
I think it really came about having conversations with friends. And in the course of conversation, you would share stories or anecdotal information that you'd collected over a period of time. And a couple of people said, you ought to write that down. That'd make a great book. That'd make a great story. So I went back and kind of had a collection of things that I had noted down in a folder and extracted them and started to create the stories. And then I used people that I worked with, other investigators that I had the pleasure to work with, people even in the corporate world, and made my characters composites of those people. So I had composite stories of real events and then characters that are made up of real people.
It must have been difficult trying to decide which stories you're going to share, because I'm sure you have so many.
I think what I wanted to do was pick stories that were intriguing. And of course, you write about a serial killer, you immediately have an audience. Everybody wants to read about serial killers. But I wanted to do two things. The real crime genre is a whole nother ballgame. And there are really good writers out there that write about that. For me, the real crime really focuses on the crime itself. And the investigators are important, clearly, but they're really not the focal point. So what I wanted to do was take a story that has a crime, and you can't have a murder mystery without a murder. And I wanted the story to be about the investigators and the people in the story, and I wanted them to be relatable and likable. So I wanted it to be character-driven as opposed to event-driven. And I think that's the big difference between your crime fiction and your true crime.
So how would you say that your experience serving as chief of police really influenced the way you approach storytelling?
I think being both a police officer and coming up through the ranks, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and ultimately as a police chief, you have different perspectives of events. When something happens, there's the boot on the ground, the initial investigator, the initial officer at the scene, and their perspective. And then as the story unfolds, sooner or later, you end up with the police chief in front of the media if it's a big enough story. And you are the one charged with telling the story to the media in such a fashion that it's truthful and accurate. At the same time, you don't give away clues. You don't blow the investigation and look like an idiot. So having done both, I think that helped in creating characters, in being able to tell stories from a variety of perspectives.
So, without giving away any spoilers, let's talk about your books. The first one, Oh, What a Tangled Web. Can you share about that book?
Sure. That's the first. There's a three book, well, at this point, three book kind of a series, although you can read any of them, they'll stand alone. But the characters develop throughout the three books. But this one is about a serial killer, and he preys on young women who are involved in the sex trade in San Francisco's uh, old off Broadway or Broadway area. And he is pretty selective about individuals that he goes after, trying to find people who don't have a lot of family, obviously, people who can go missing for a long period of time before anyone notices. And then that information comes to light in a completely unrelated way because a couple happens to buy a storage locker and finds things in the locker that disturb them, and they call the police to talk about it, which starts the investigation into this guy.
Now, is that based off a real life story?
It's a combination of real life stories, yes, about obviously uh, women who have been victims of homicides who are in the sex trade. They are, if you look at serial killers, the Green River Killer, a number of people who have been involved in multiple fatalities, they target that area because people go missing frequently just because of the lifestyle, and nobody reports them, nobody notices. They're really unknown, and it's they're a target. They truly are.
So, we don't want to do spoilers on your books because they are such great reads. Can you share with us the next book that you publish, Hiding in Plain Sight?
That one is about the seminal event is the kidnapping and murder of a young girl in San Francisco. And the stories on all three books, the first three, are all centered in San Francisco and the Bay Area because that's home for me, and I'm comfortable writing about it, and I'm able to tell a story without having north-south streets intersect, so it's technically accurate. And in this case, it's based loosely on a real case that I was involved in investigating, and a young girl who was kidnapped and murdered. And the story in this one really develops her life, her family, the family connections in the neighborhood. It takes place in North Beach in San Francisco, which is an old Italian neighborhood in San Francisco. And the same investigators and a few new players on the investigative side. And they have to find this individual. And he is somewhat elusive. He has killed people before, but not on the West Coast. He is an East Coast product that has come out here, so it makes it a little bit different. The real story is not a serial killer. The one that's based on it was a one-off, but in the book he becomes a serial killer again. That's something people like to read about. It's current.
Then let's dive into your next book, Greed.
Greed's a little bit of a departure because it starts in Europe. It starts in Paris, and it is in Paris and it's in the Netherlands, and ultimately works its way back into San Francisco through New York. A lot of the story is taking place outside of the immediate Bay Area, but ultimately it comes back to San Francisco. And the story is about art theft and art forgery. And then ultimately, because one of this group of forgers becomes greedy, hence the title, there's a homicide that occurs because of that. And that hooks my San Francisco people back into the story. I was lucky because on multiple counts, but on one, my wife is a graphic designer and an art school graduate, and she knows a lot about art, and she was able to steer me in the right direction. And at the same time, I also had a year as the head of security for the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. So I was familiar with art. I was familiar with art values. And I had the opportunity to work with our restoration people at the museum, who are the ones who fix a piece of art if it gets damaged in transit or something happens to it while it's up on the wall. and they have to make it right again. So I had a chance to sit with them and learn some of the things that they have to use, techniques they use to restore these art masterpieces.
And then your newest book, Still Waters Run Deep. Can you share that with us?
Sure. This one is a real departure for me. This one takes place in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, and it focuses on a militia group that's trying to take a piece of property in Montana and convert it to their home compound, and how they go about doing that through some criminal enterprise. It is different, and I was outside my comfort zone of San Francisco, but I have friends that live up in Montana, and I was able to travel there and talk with them and talk with people in law enforcement up there and garner information. And then my wife and I took a road trip through Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and made notes. And it was kind of a research trip because I still wanted the books to be accurate. If I say in the story that the suspect pulled off at a roadside rest stop on Interstate 25, just south of Casper, Wyoming, I want there to be a rest stop on I-25 south of Casper, Wyoming. I don't want somebody in Casper to pick my book up and read it and go, well, this idiot doesn't know what he's talking about. There's no rest stop there. So I wanted it to be accurate, but it was different, and it's been fairly well received. I may take those characters and in that book and make a second book for them.
Is that why I think a lot of people resonate with your books, is because you bring such real world depth to it, like for your books in San Francisco and these other books, the other book that you have that's in Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho?
I hope so. I want them to be accurate. As a former police officer, you read other people's works, and I do, and you look at TV shows, and there's a plethora of television shows and crime fiction. My goodness, there are a ton. And sometimes they're not technically accurate. And that's a little concerning for me. And I find if I'm reading a book, someone else's book, and I find an inaccuracy, I start looking for inaccuracies. I lose a little bit of the story, and I kind of concentrate on a mistake. And I don't want to have a big mistake in my book where somebody's focused on that and misses out on a good story. And that would be on me as an author or writer. I don't think I consider myself an author or writer. You want that story to be accurate, and you want a reader to focus on the story, not looking for something that's not accurate. And I understand when you're on television, and I spent 10 years working for Universal Studios in Los Angeles. I understand the issue of an hour-long TV show that's in reality about 43 minutes after you take all the commercial breaks out. And the protagonist has to solve a triple homicide in 43 minutes. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't. You don't get DNA evidence back from the crime scene 15 minutes later. It takes weeks to get DNA. So you want the stories to be accurate, and you need filler because there's going to be these dead times when you're working on your investigation in which you're waiting for results to come from the lab. You're waiting for results to come from tech people. You're waiting for results to come from audiovisual. So you have to fill the story in and still keep it interesting.
So why don't we dive into Still Waters Run Deep? I know that you've shared a little bit with us, but what even inspired you to write that book?
I think the militia issue is current. There's been certainly enough in the papers. If you go back to January 6th and some of the militia groups that were involved at the Capitol and demonstrations that had taken place as a prelude to that involved different militia groups. And then you go all the way back to the Oklahoma City bombing and Timothy McVeigh. He was a militia group member out of Michigan. So these groups exist, and some of them are really, in my research, I found a lot of them are really more libertarian than they are conservative or liberal or anything else. That's probably the better label, that they just kind of want to be left alone. They don't want any government interference. They want to live their life totally separate and off the grid, so to speak, from government. So that intrigued me a bit. So I started looking into it, and it seems like there's a number of these groups that have been up in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming area. And one of the things that one of the groups had done was armored car robberies. And that was how they were financing their militia. And so taking that information, I started creating the story of a militia group that gets involved in some criminal activity, which results in a homicide or two, and the subsequent investigation by initially a couple of Casper detectives, and then it spreads out because it covers multiple states, and the FBI is involved, and federal agencies, and so the impetus was really the fact that the militia idea was current. And then as you do your research, you find out that this area had resonated with some of the militia groups. So I went to there. Plus, to be perfectly selfish, I had friends up there, so it made the trip easier, and I could combine research with social.
Well, that makes that a lot easier, and especially when you have that inspiration. And I love how you just weave in the aspects of this real police work that you do into your novels. Do all of your novels have that?
I sure hope so. I want them to have that. It's, you know, for me, law enforcement has been a great career. I had 35 years, and I loved it. I had four different departments in two states. So I got to see a lot. I got to see different styles of law enforcement. I got to see different aspects of law enforcement, and met lots of great people. So you want the stories to resonate. You want the character to be likable and relatable. You want the reader to identify. I found, in all candor, I found as I wrote this, because my characters are composites, so they become a new person. That I found I liked my characters. I really enjoyed my character, and I had fun, creating this persona for the character, and the fact that where they went to eat, what restaurant they went to, and there was a restaurant that I mentioned in all three of the books in San Francisco called Original Joe's, and it's actually just outside of San Francisco, in Daly City. But I mean, you could hit the San Francisco border with a rock from the restaurant. And the owner is San Francisco, and his wife is San Francisco, and it's been a staple in the restaurant industry in this area. So my characters, that's their go-to place, kind of like Michael Conley has Harry Bosch going to Musso and Frank's in Hollywood. So Joe's became my Musso and Frank's. And so I was able to bring the restaurant into it, and some of the characters at the restaurant. I know one of the head bartenders there, so he becomes a focal point in the story and his background. So that part of building the story and the characters is fun and enjoyable, and you hope the reader takes the same kind of liking the character away from the story.
Well, I always think it's so intriguing to pick up a book and have it list and name places where you can go and sit and enjoy and read the book. And I think that's why your books are just so compelling to so many readers.
Again, thank you. I think writing about San Francisco, you have a leg up on some other folks. And that's not to denigrate any other author or writer. I think there are a lot of people out there that do really good work. But when you use San Francisco as your base of operation, just about everybody knows San Francisco. Whether they watched a news story that involves San Francisco, they watch TV shows that involve San Francisco, they watch movies that involve. I mean, in the second book, Hiding in Plain Sight, the focal point is Saints Peter and Paul Church. Well, for a lot of people, that doesn't mean anything. But as soon as you see the church, you hearken back to Dirty Harry. And the original Dirty Harry movie was taking place in North Beach, right in front of St. Peter and Paul's Church. So even if you're living in Iowa, you have seen Dirty Harry. So that church resonates. So when you read the story, oh, I know where that is. So I think San Francisco gives you a real advantage, because I think most people have seen enough of San Francisco to be able to place your story.
Exactly. And for folks traveling there or people who live there, when you talk about Little Italy, they're like, oh, I know exactly where this is at. And it really resonates.
It's true, and the city's rich. I mean, there's great neighborhoods, great ethnic neighborhoods. There's it's an old city. I mean, it goes back to the gold rush. There's a lot of history. I mean, and 1906 earthquake, which most people know about, and the rebuilding of the city and the resilience of the city, that all resonates. And being born and raised there, it's easy for me, but it's also very likable. The city's likable, and I love the city, and so I thoroughly enjoy showcasing it.
I bet. I bet you do. Well, and so it has me kind of thinking because you write with such authenticity. I mean, it's just one of the things that I really appreciate about your books. So how do you like balance that with suspense in your storytelling?
I think if the story is authentic, the suspense is going to get built into it. As I said a little bit earlier, things don't happen quickly. Sometimes they do, but for the most part, they don't. Most investigations are somewhat dogged. You start, at the crime scene, and you start eliminating people and targeting maybe somebody who looks like the right person. You start collecting your evidence. You start building your case, your investigation. So it is a little bit tedious sometimes and technical. So you want the story to have all of that, but you don't want it to, for me, to overshadow the character. You want it to be there in the background, but you want the character to be in the forefront. And I think that's, again, going back to the difference between crime fiction and true crime. True crime, that the nitty gritty of the investigation, the physical evidence, it is paramount. And it can almost be gruesome depending on the type of case it is. And I wanted to avoid that in mind. I wanted the story to have the seminal event that triggered it, but I didn't want it to be the focal point. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, these are composite stories, but if somebody reads it, they'll pick up aspects of the story that they may have read about or know about. And what I don't want is to have somebody's family pick up a story and read it and tie it back to a family member or a tragedy in the family and have to relive it through the story. I just want it to be there as the kickoff for the story, but then it fades to the background and the story development and the characters become the focal point.
That is very thoughtful, the way that you constructed those your books in a way that really protects family members. I applaud you for that.
Well, you when you do this, you see the toll that these crimes take on families. I mean, some of them, they're irreparable. The families are damaged to the point that they don't recover, and that's very real. So I don't want to be a contributor to that kind of a situation. I want the story to be a good read, but I don't want it to be to relive a tragedy for someone.
Would you say that you have any themes about crime or human nature that tend to emerge in your writing?
I think the human side of the characters, the investigators. I think people will read them and like the character and like their flaws, and I don't want their flaws to be so horrible that it renders them unable to do their job. I mean, I'm not. I guess I am picking on BritBox a little bit. I look at some of the stories coming out of BritBox out of Great Britain, and some of the characters are so flawed that I don't know how they get up in the morning. So I want my I want my investigators to be human and have normal human flaws and how that affects their life. But I also want them to have a life. I also want them to have a relationship with other people. I want them to be relatable. I want the reader to say, "Oh, yeah, I get that. I did that. I understand that." So I think that's really important.
What differences do you see between real life investigations, and it kind of dovetails what we were just talking about, and the way they're often portrayed in other books or maybe media?
Well, I think there was the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads, and the news story, and I get it. I mean, you have limited amount of time to put the news on, and I think a news story. I think they say even big news story gets 3 to 5 minutes on the 6 o'clock news and much closer to 3. And what holds that reader? How do you get your Nielsen ratings? You've got to get something on the screen that pulls people in, shocks people, whatever it happens to be. So I think sometimes the media does that, and I understand they're selling a product and they have to survive. And I think sometimes authors do the same thing. They become focused on the gore and the gruesome part. I think the story loses a bit when you do that. Again, that's me, and there are people out there that write things that for me are a little bit gruesome, and they sell books, and there obviously is an audience, so they wouldn't keep doing it. It's just not my cup of tea.
I agree with you on that. So
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to be more intellectually challenged in a book than having to get through gruesome details. And it kind of has me thinking, I mean, I know you've done such amazing police work, and thank you for your service that you've done for our great state. But you also worked private security for NBC Universal. Has any of that influenced, your work there, influenced your perspective in your writing?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. One, my time at NBC Universal, it was a great job. I had a fantastic boss who had come up in the industry from literally working as a grip and working as a best boy and working on lighting and working on production, all the way up to president of studio operations. And the CEO, Ron Meyer, of the company literally started in the mailroom and worked his way up to CEO. So these were two people who came up by their bootstraps and were just great to work for. They treated everybody well. They were so that helped me in understanding, and they were great to go to ask questions. I did. I probably drove them crazy with questions, but it helped me understand the industry. And literary industry is a little different than the movie industry, but a lot of things are the same. And, in reality, if you have a really great story, but you don't have an agent, and that's always an issue, you're not going to get your story in front of the big five. The publishing houses don't talk to anybody but agents. And I learned that at Universal, that you could have a great script, but without an agent, no one at the studio is going to see it. And the studios are all the same. They all work through your agent. So you have to go find an agent. And that's no mean feat. You'll get a lot of rejection letters. And I'm at the point in my career writing, I'm still doing hybrid publishing. I don't have an agent. And if there's one listening, call me. But I think that's a really critical thing. And I learned that at the studio, that without an agent, no matter how good your material is, no one's going to see it.
Yes, unfortunately, it's all about connection and who's connected with who. It's still so.
It's true. Absolutely.
So, what surprised you most about this whole process of being a novelist?
One, I was flattered that people have read the books and liked them. That's always reassuring. I've also been fortunate that I have really good friends who read my stuff and critique it, and I think that's good too. Hopefully, that makes me better, and they're honest with me. One of the people I worked with at Universal was a former fire chief, and he happens to be Italian. And at the conclusion of reading the first book, he wrote back and said that he enjoyed the book, but there were no firefighters and no Italians. So in the second book, in the acknowledgments, I put in there that the second book takes place in an Italian neighborhood in San Francisco, and the victim's father's a firefighter. So I said that was for him. So that part is kind of gratifying. And the second thing was, when you do a book signing, I'm amazed at how many people come up to you and talk to you, and whether they buy a book or not, they still want to talk. How many of them are aspiring writers? And what they really want to know is how to get their book published. And they really want to know how they get their book edited. How do they get their book seen? And I'll try and be as honest as I can with people and tell them, it's an interesting world out there, and there's a lot of fly-by-night people. I mean, really a lot. And I was victimized by one publishing house. Initially, it cost me money, And as the ex-cop, I should have known better. I should have done my due diligence. But I was taken in by the promise of being a New York Times bestseller in 5 weeks for X number of dollars. Well, it doesn't happen. You don't become a New York Times bestseller in 5 weeks unless you're Michael Connelly. So it's a different world.
Well, there's definitely a lot to be aware of, especially publishing your own book or going through a hybrid publisher. My goodness, I mean, Brian, you're such an inspiration. Where can our listeners go to learn more about you and be part of your community?
Well, the website is goldengatetales.com, and all the books are on the website, and the connectivity to Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Goodreads and any place else you want to find the books. And they're in local bookstores too, up here primarily because they resonate in the Bay Area. And that part, again, you were asking what people like. I love the local bookstores. I love small bookstores. They're just fun places to be, and the people that own them tend to be really interesting and just fun to hang out with.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Brian. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your books, Still Waters, Run Deep, and Greed. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.